welcome to another episode of Geek Shop. With me today again is Chris. Say hi,
Hey,
Chris.
everybody. Hi, Chris.
And, and we have a special guest with us today. Introduce yourself, please.
My name is Jason Lapidus. I'm the co-publisher and artist half of Group of Seven Comics.
And I've been told to ask you how you pronounce your last names by one of the other people earlier.
I pronounce it Lapidus, but I've heard it pronounced a multitude of ways. As long as you're saying it with the intention of being respectful, I don't mind how it goes. I'm from Toronto, and I've heard in Toronto every accent under the sun and English spoken with a wide range of different flavors, and it's fine. As long as we understand each other, it's totally fine.
Oh, perfect. No, trust me, I get that all the time with my name also. I'm sure Chris is easy, so.
Yeah, it's easy having a name that everybody knows how to pronounce.
So, Jason, tell us about your comic book.
I work on a series called Group of Seven Comics. We've been going since about 2017, and we are, I think, about 15 or 16 publications in. And we usually go straight to the traditional, comic book floppy as an issue, and then eventually end up in a paperback of some kind. And it's action, adventure, historical fiction. The first book featured 7 famous Canadian historical figures on a secret but fictional mission to save the world. Guys like poet John McCrae, Maple Leafs founder Conn Smythe, Nobel Prize winner and Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson. These kinds of guys who all truthfully served in World War One as soldiers and went on to shape much of Canada in the 20th century. And then our second story arc features 4 spies who are undercover on the front lines of war-torn Europe under the guise of frontline nurses. And they're called the Peregrines, and they're a most secret wing of the Allied forces that, of course, never existed. But since in history, women were not allowed to serve in a combat role, we really wanted to put women in a combat role. So we made a secret, or a secret branch of the Allies that allows them to go on missions that protect us from the unknown and the unbelievable. Just gives us a chance to tell the kinds of stories we love to tell, and have the kinds of adventure and obstacles that make it really, really interesting to talk about as collaborators. Speaking of which, I work with a co-publisher and writer, a guy named Chris Sanigan. And it's his birthday today. It's his 45th birthday. He's just a young punk, and he's out at a bar somewhere listening to live music like he should. And he's the one who initiated the project and got me into drawing comics. And it's been a really fun partnership over the last, it's been 10 years of us talking about it, but we've been publishing together for 8.
So as far as when you're writing your comics, it sounds like you have a lot of historical sort of bends to it. How much research do you do for that?
Lots. There's a lot of research, whether it is just figuring out, for instance, with Group of Seven Most Secret Tale, which is available, of course, on our website, group7comics.ca. With Group of Seven Most Secret Tale, there is so much information about the 7 guys in it that we have access to their military files in real life. So we were able to put a lot of that information,
nice.
kind of create file cards of the guys for I'm a G.I. Joe kid. So creating those little biographies about the guys at the back of every issue, that was sort of a fun thing we got to do. And then, get their file here on this this side.
Yes.
Put those in there. But we also got to include a lot of information about them to help inform the character. At the same time, we had to do research into what makes good action adventure. So we noticed, of course, there's a pattern in team books or in team stories. And you see it maybe solidified in Akira Kurosawa's, I feel so snobby just referencing that. In Seven Samurai, there's a template, right? And that gets passed on cross-culturally, eventually getting to me through Star Wars.
And
you
I've
get
watched
your master. Did you watch it? Seven Samurai?
No, I've watched your video on yours and Chris's on X-Men comics also. So, group teams there.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, Claremont's X-Men doesn't follow the Kurosawa model as much, but the idea of you get your master, your apprentice, you get your rogue, like your kind of wild card guy, you get your wild man, like your Chewbacca or Forrest kind of character, you get a couple comedic characters, and you get a princess. And that template follows through, and it seems to just really make a great group dynamic. So when we were putting together the characters for a group of seven, A Most Secret Tale, we weren't just looking for, okay, who are these guys in history, but how would they fit into a classic action adventure team book? Someone's got to be the prototypical leader, square jawed, stoic, noble,
Yes.
willing to do whatever needs to be done. But someone also has to challenge it. Someone has to be the kind of jerk on the team, the one to talk back and cause friction. Someone needs to be youthful and enthusiastic to follow the leader. People need to bring some comedic elements to the team as well. So finding these characters that we're finding these historical figures that made an impact in the 20th century, but then think about like how they fit into an army unit, like how would they actually function? But then also how would it make for a fun story? So we do have to take creative liberties to make it an engaging fiction, even though the people in it were real. So that was kind of fun. So there's research into, all the visual references, and I'm not one of those guys that gets bogged down with uniform details. So, the Canadian military went through iterations of their uniforms, and the last thing I wanted to do was draw 150 pages of Canadian military uniforms. I'm like, let's get these guys out of that as quick as possible because
Yes.
they look terrible. It was one size fits none as
Now,
far as the approach of the
have
right.
you had any readers comment on that, saying the uniforms are not accurate, or you know, at
I
this
don't
time
think
era?
so.
Okay.
I think I've been a little scared to kind of go after that, air cadet and veteran or reserve community, like going to those kinds of events that have those kinds of people there, because I know that the work won't hold up in terms of its accuracy. But at the same time, I imagine anyone who picks it up looks at it and goes, "Oh, this guy isn't a detail aficionado. He's not pretending to be either." So they'll give me hopefully a pass on that. But we also love the idea that once you get the guys out of their uniforms, each of their things that they wear and they use, they could be custom. I mean, just because in World War I we don't talk about some custom rifle doesn't mean there wasn't a one-off, a gunsmith who makes a special weapon for a unique soldier. So there is a little bit of latitude there, but we do try and at least fit it a little bit within a grounded reality. But we had to research, where everyone was in the world, what events are going on at the time. So again, in this book, the events are taking place around the famous Battle of Vimy Ridge. So we had to learn about these things, which was truly um, a, a challenge, but like a heavy-hearted special thing to go learn about. It was the centenary of the war, and I'm lucky enough to have lived in Canada during a time where we don't have conflict in Canada, right? There's no armed conflict
Yes.
here, and I'm really grateful for that. So thinking about guys who are half my age going off, not understanding what they're about to experience in Europe, and then never coming back or coming back completely different. It can be a heavy subject, but we weren't going for that. We were going for again an action and adventure, something that we really loved, sort of growing up in the '80s. But the research side of it got heavy sometimes. It was meaningful to think about the centenary and the series. So I found it to be a great act of remembrance. Like the research was an act of remembrance that I really appreciated, but it doesn't inform too much of the book because it is lighthearted. Does that answer your question about the research?
Definitely, yeah.
Yes.
So I also
Okay,
find it
taking it a step
amazing.
further, if you don't mind me going one more.
Okay.
In the next book or the next sort of arc of our comic called Peregrines, we have this completely fictional branch of the Canadian Allied sort of forces, where these women are nurses, but they're also, I mean, really, they're skydiving spies. They like bomb into territory that is hostile and complete these really dangerous missions. So I got to design their outfits based on things that are in history, trying to evoke a little bit of some of the cut of their nurse garb in terms of there's sort of double-breasted buttons down the front outfit and them wearing blue, but also had to look at what pilots were wearing in open canopy days when they're in biplanes. So the goggles and high collars and big leather jackets, and then trying to streamline that into some sort of skydiving outfit of the time. So creating almost like a 1917 female superhero based off of these historical anchors was a really fun design challenge that I am like super grateful. It was a really formative experience for me as a character designer to get to research that. That was cool too.
Okay.
So the one thing I wanted to say was I have so much respect for the fact that your book is not only about Canadian history, but it has like Canadian art history in the title as well.
True. Thank you. I wish I could take credit. I'm going to pass that one off to Sanigan. That was part of the initial pitch that he delivered to me. He's one of those kinds of guys that can hold something in. He'd be, I think, a deadly poker player if he had the desire to do so. So the two of us were taking our respective families to a park one day. We've been friends for a while, and we were pushing kids on the swings. And he kind of pitched the idea of, hey, I have this idea for a comic book. Would you want to work on it? And he said, can I pitch it to you? And he delivered this idea of these 7 soldiers. He started telling me their names. And I was like, I know who that, I know who that is. This is interesting. I love this idea. I could kind of see in my mind, a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen mixed with Indiana Jones, mixed with G.I. Joe, mixed with a Canadian Heritage Minute, you know? And then he said, and the name of it is Group of 7. And I said, okay, I'm in. To me, that was like, it was just such a nail on the head Canadian thing or Canadiana thing. I often love to throw in contrast Canadian culture and Canadians with our American cousins to the south, and some of the contrasts between the styles of storytelling, the styles of identity construction, like how we tell our story as Canadians and how they tell their story as Americans. And they're very much into myth making. Their characters are larger than life, even from history, and ours are very, very humble. And I like that idea, but I also love it that we get to play with ours when we want to, because I haven't seen a lot of examples of Canadians playing with the toys in the chest box or the toy box of Canadian history. And I also am very used to us doing it humbly. And so Chris didn't present this idea of, okay, it's the Canadian Super 7, it's the great, it's the World Series when it's like one country, or it's the Super Bowl and it's again one country. This was not just like the Amazing 7, it's just a group of 7.
Yeah.
And it meant that they were everymen, and that maybe it wasn't the most planned thing that they were supposed to go on this mission. So in one name, it hit a chord of like humility and modesty that I really respond to with my heroes. I like stoic heroes who don't say everything they're thinking. They kind of hold a lot in and have a stiff upper lip. I respond to that with characters. But it also right away speaks to it being Canadian and it being historical and it being art culture. So I was like, oh, it's in one name. He's got all these brand things built in. So I said to myself that I really want this comic book to exist, and no one else is going to do it if we don't. Like, if we really want this to be a thing, we have to make it. So we both did the thing we had never done before, which is learn to make comics. And like you were talking about filming a show, it's always a learning process. You're always improving, and our first 24 pages were a miracle that they got done, and the next 24, and so on and so on. And now I've lost count as to how many pages I've drawn. But it's never stopped learning. It's always a refining process.
So did you
I
find
love it. So
did did you find it the typical thing where the first issue was so hard to do, and you changed so much, you wanted to do this and that, and now 5 issues later you go, you know what, this is a breeze now.
It never got to be a breeze.
Oh, no, 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 but the
But
first
I
issue
definitely
you have so
found,
much expectations.
sure. Well, I'm gonna just give myself some credit, and it's maybe false, it's fine. But I think I have good taste. And like the gap between my skill and my taste is so vast that I'm always, every day of my life, I'm pushing to try and my taste goes like that. And I push, 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 my taste gets away. So, the first 8 pages to get done, which we released online, in April of 2017, it it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, was to like let go of those pages and upload them. It was terrifying, because at at that age I had good taste in artists, and I really expected the best for myself, but I did not know what paper to work on, and I chose the wrong kind for half my pages.
Yes.
I used the wrong tools. I used the wrong brushes. I didn't know how to manage ink wash, but I was trying it anyway. So it was, I hand lettered. Oh, I never practiced hand lettering before. So it was
Oh, you know what? I
it,
uh, I just finished a book where I collected my original mini comics, and Chris knows about this. The reason it took me so many years to put it together was I look back at the artwork, same thing as you, where I look and go, I hand lettered this, I did that, and I did not want to show people that work anymore.
yeah, no, I didn't want to. I still have like the feelings about it, but I also know enough. I've been an art teacher and talked with students enough to know that you have to just let it go. And part of the story of like the trade paperback, it's not just the narrative of these seven guys, it's also the narrative of two friends learning to make comics. And you can see as you go through that, oh, on page one they don't know how to do this, and then on page 50 it's like, oh, they figured out this thing. And every few pages you can see these two kids in their
So
40s
actually,
have learned to do something new.
that brings up a question.
What's
Are
that?
you
Sure.
digital or old school?
I'm a marriage. There are things that I prefer to do digitally, and there are things that I prefer to do traditionally. I love to do most things traditionally. I think the feeling of a pencil across paper and ink across paper are like some of the best rushes I've ever felt. I love to draw. And then I think about, that Malcolm Gladwell idea of 10,000 hours. Have you guys read Outliers or heard about Outliers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This notion you have to get 10,000 hours of experience before you can consider yourself, like, I guess, prepared to do something. So all those years of drawing in sketchbooks, as a younger guy, I don't want to throw that away. I love those experiences. And when I draw comics now, if I get to work in pencil on paper, I'm like, that's a one-to-one, bringing in all that experience in. When I go digital, and I do have the tools to work digitally right here, um, a lot of the experience does come into it. Sure, I mean, I'm still drawing with a stylus, using the same part of my brain, but the experience of working on a tablet or Cintiq or something, it doesn't compare to working on Bristol. I mean,
Yeah.
ooh, it's so good. It's so good. So yeah, I like, here's a page partially done, and an element of this was done. I did a smaller thumbnail to choose how many panels and what was going to happen in each panel. And then I scanned that thumbnail, enlarged it, made the panel borders exactly the way I wanted, with the gutters exactly the way I wanted digitally, added in maybe a couple of details that were digital, and then printed that off in very light ink. And then I'm drawing now over, I penciled over that ink, and I'm now inking over that printer ink as well. So there is, like I said, the marriage between
Oh, nice. Okay.
uh, traditional and digital. And then I'll scan that back in, color it digitally, and have it ready for, formatted for the book. So it's a back and forth.
Okay. It's funny when you talked about your first pages, how you didn't really want to give them up and you wanted to work on them. And the one expression I always go with is, an artist never finishes a work, it just gets taken away. And that's
I
how I feel.
I subscribe to that 100%. And eventually you have to, I guess, as adults, we're supposed to learn how to be the one to take it away.
Yeah.
You know, we are both the artist and the editor who has to take it out of their hands.
Yeah.
So I find that it's informing my style a lot, in that I'm trying to get my style to be what, like, to look like what I can do in a day, each page, and
Mm-hmm.
not more. So at the end of the day, whatever I have done is kind of the style I'm going for, and figuring out, okay, that's that 8 to 12 hour style page, and the more efficiently I can get to that version of me, the happier I'll be, because I don't need to crosshatch everything. Scott Williams ink, like, all that back and forth
That's it.
detail.
Yes.
I don't think it actually adds narrative value. It is beautiful. It's textural, and
It's Scott Williams, and it works for him. It doesn't work for
it
everyone.
does. It also, he's part of an assembly line system,
Yes.
and that's cool. Um, it it works for him, and I find, like, it, that thinking of trying to draw like Jim Lee and Scott Williams as a team, it slows me down.
Mm.
I'm trying to find a streamlined version where I'm only focused on the narrative value. So if I need to have cross hatching or even hatching, it should be because it's part of the best way to tell that story or that scene. But if I can get away with some real kind of flat Mike Mignola or Alex
Yeah.
Toth,
Yeah.
high contrast, black and white, I think it serves me mentally better. So I can just do that and move on. But
Well,
So,
also,
I
if
can
it
totally
connects
relate
with
to
the
that.
reader, you know?
I can
Yeah.
totally relate to that because, and I have that. I do a comic called Blue Orchid, which is it's sort of it's about a teenage Southeast Asian girl, and I actually go really simple. I go like cartoony simple with it because I
yes.
actually learned a lesson from an animator a long time ago. He was a creator. It was his name was what's it, Pindle, Kai Pindle. He did a lot of he did the old woman who lived in a shoe short that was in on the NFB, and he did a lot of stuff like that. And I was working with him on a TV series called Peep in the Big Wide World, and Peep was this little bird that was just a circle with little legs. And I asked him about it. I'm like, you're one of the top animators in the world. Why did you just pick this like super simple thing? And he was like, because I wanted kids to be able to draw it, because this is a cartoon for little kids, and I wanted them to be able to copy it. And so if they watch the show and they can sit and they can easily draw it. And so when I designed my comic book, I actually went sort of the opposite direction where I was like, how simple can I make this character and how cartoony? So if another, because my audience is also not necessarily just younger people, but I want younger people to be able to look at it, but even sort of look at it and go, oh, I could draw that. And I was like, yes, you can. And so I sort of go that style. And so even within that experimenting, I've actually gone backwards where I've been like, how simple can I possibly make this and still tell the story? So even without like sort of just eliminating things, I almost go like to the opposite end and go like, could I draw this as a stick man and still tell the story without having to get like super detailed if I wanted to? But it's like, so I definitely understand that idea of like, sort of retooling your brain, because everybody wants to draw the cover or an Alex Ross beautiful piece of artwork. But then it's like, you sort of mentally think to yourself, how can you like take that down and simplify it and maybe even make it better? Because I think there are a few artists that can do it, but even Alex Ross, I've read a few of his comic books. Sometimes you're sitting there so taken in by the art that you actually sort of forget the story, or you don't even really care about the story because you're just enjoying the book. And so
Yes.
I really respect that idea of like, how can I take my artwork back and get to the point where the story becomes such the focus instead of being, the artwork being such the focus. Like, we could look at Rob Liefeld and some of the early image guys who really sort of went crazy with the imaging. And if you actually read the stories, if I was to draw an issue of, some of the Spawn issues or some of the, early image stuff and do it in Stickman, it would be the stupidest story you've ever read. And so to simplify it, I think you're giving the story more power. And I think that's a really good thing. I think it's a brave thing to do as an artist, because you always can hide in the crosshatching. But when you really have the story out there, simplicity, almost stickman if you want to even.
But this
You're,
goes back to our old. This is a subject, comic character we always talk about in our interviews, and this goes to a great artist, Grew the Wanderer, Sergio Aragonis.
yeah,
Look at his art. I mean, it's simplified, but then you look at the background, and he has every detail on a pirate ship.
yeah,
You know, you know. But his storytelling art works.
yeah,
Yeah, it does. It comes down to story, but that's not to say that people can't enjoy what they enjoy.
yeah,
So if you want to just look at the pictures and absorb the energy that went into those drawings, totally valid thing to appreciate. I'm just story focused, and I'm going after artists that are hopefully story focused too. So I don't mind things being highly stylized. I don't mind faces looking weird, like some really cool Tim Sale art, or whatever it is,
Yes.
as long as I'm connecting with those characters and the journey that they're on, and somehow it takes me where I need to go. So yeah, I do like when story comes first, because to me, comics is a language, and speaking that language well is a good thing. It's something I would aspire to. But getting bogged down in rendering, I also don't think it's an economic choice. For instance, 155 pages, $25. So let's just pretend it's 155 drawings,
Yes.
$25. That's not a good economic deal there. Where if I do a print, like a print like on the wall, like that beautiful Michael Cho there, the Fantastic Four, one drawing, $25. And that's reproduced. So I think if I'm getting bogged down and spending days and days and days rendering this panel, someone's reading through it in seconds. I don't I don't know if it adds any experiential value or enough experiential value to make it worth, excuse me, all that hyper rendering. So I love Arthur Adams. He's probably the guy, the artist I love the most that renders the most. So much
Yes.
detail, so much time, and he really hasn't done monthly comics for
But
decades, right?
it takes him. I've heard he's very slow.
He is, but
But he's
his
amazing.
work is amazing.
Amazing.
Doesn't
Yes.
do monthly comics. When I try and like look forward as to the version of me that I want to become, or I want to be able to look back on, I want a body of work that's story.
yeah,
Yes.
So if I want a
Yes.
body of work that's story, I have to have a style to work in that allows me to make story and to work fast enough. So I have to let go of all that rendering and stick to the high contrast and or even open shapes, and that's fine too. That clear line style is totally beautiful, and I love to work in that style too, like the 1010 stuff and lots of the Franco-Belgian European stuff. I think there's a great appeal there as well. So, you know,
Actually, that brings up
that
my
kind of helps
question.
explain.
That
Yeah,
what you just mentioned brings up a question. Talking about our title Geek Shop. What comics did you go up reading?
my way in, my way into comics culture was what was already in TV and movies first. So things like Super Friends and Superman movie. Um, I was in Batman 66. Like I was aware of the
Hmm.
pop culture cross media characters. So when I came across comics early on, I knew that okay, the superheroes they're from comics. Okay, I got that. But my first comics are GI Joe. GI Joe number 19. I got at the pharmacy next to the doctor's office when I was a little kid out in Scarborough.
Sorry, number
And so
19.
GI Joe,
You said number 19. What's the cover on it? Trying to
yeah,
remember.
it's the cover of it is like they're it's a very generic cover of them on the battlefield, and it's the one when like Cobra knows that the Joe base is at the motor pool on Staten Island, and they attack, and the Joes use like the battle base underneath. It's they
Okay.
basically show they use
No,
the
because
toy.
I grew up reading GI Joe comics and watching GI Joe cartoons. So, but that 19, I can't remember that cover.
It's the one, spoilers, where Quinn dies, Doctor Venom dies, and Scarface dies.
Wow.
And it's sort of like the end of an arc where Snake Eyes finally gets back to the group. And yeah, it's like there's a his tank on the cover and guys fighting, and it's like generic cover. But when I read it, there was so much going on. And the first thing I thought when I read those, A, I wanted the toys, and B, I wanted to draw.
Yes.
And this goes back to what you guys were saying about those characters that are a little more simple, is you want to have something that makes a kid want to be able to draw it or be able to, it's accessible. And I love reading comics where when I'm finished reading, all I want to do is draw, or I'm
Now, let me
watching
ask you this:
anime.
when you're reading that GI Joe comic, I don't remember who the artist was at that time. Inside,
That issue, I
oh,
think, if memory serves, was a guy named Mike Vosberg. Now, I could be wrong.
yes,
I might
yeah,
have mixed up.
okay, yes, he did a lot of
I
issues. I
think
do remember that.
I'm going to look while we're talking. Like, how can I
Now,
not?
now,
While you're
it,
searching, I'll tell you a quick GI Joe story about myself.
Oh,
In that,
sure.
so I collect. I don't collect too many comics now, but I did for a while. But there's only one comic that I ever went back, spent enough money on, and rebought because I wanted it, and that was a mint condition issue of GI Joe #1. And like that was the one time that I sort of was like, I want this comic and I want it in good condition, because I had, I think, a reprint of it in like a miniature form, and but
Oh,
just
yeah,
like,
there's a digest.
yeah, in the digest. So I had the digest of like the first 9 issues, and then all of a sudden I was like when I was old enough and I had a few dollars in my pocket, I said to myself, you know what? I'm gonna buy that wall book. I'm because normally I wasn't a big wall book guy. Like if I wanted it, I didn't care about the condition of my comics or anything. But I saw that wall book of GI Joe #1. I thought that just hits the nostalgia in the right place, and so I still have it
It's
to this
so
day.
good. It is a great issue. They reprinted it at full size on newsprint in the G.I. Joe yearbook #1. So like the story contents were known to me, and I unfortunately I don't remember where I got my copy. Probably not more than $10. I was a kid. It might have been at a con or at one of the Silver Snails in Toronto. But I still have mine. It is kind of like a perfect introduction. The art is great. Herb Trimpe and a really a great Marvel inker. I forget who it was now. But it's a really good introduction to the whole series, and the issue holds up beautifully, and it's printed reprinted lots of times. There's also a Treasury edition of it, like the
Wow.
oversized. That's the one I want to
oh
get, and
wow,
those might
okay.
cost closer to $100 now. But I, now that I've got old man eyes, I really started to enjoy the treasuries. Okay, I'm going to put a theory out to you. Okay, so action figures when we were kids, other than the giant like 12-inch GI Joes or Barbies, action figures in the late '70s and '80s became 3 3/4 inches. That small size. I'm looking to see if I have one handy. I do not, but they were that that
Yeah.
Fisher Price
Yeah,
adventure people and
yeah.
and GI Joe and Star Wars. They're 3 3/4, and then we got bigger, and so now the popular size of action figures for like my demographic is the 6 inch figure because it's proportional.
Oh yes,
So
that's it.
when we
Yeah.
were kids, comic books were, what is it? 10 and 10.18 inches by 6.625 inches. But if you scale up with us growing into adults, the treasury is like a really nice equivalent. So if you can ever get your hands on a treasury size comic, it feels better. It just feels really nice to read. So I've been a sucker when I go to a comic store or find a treasury size something. I'm really inclined to get those and read them.
Uh,
Kirby on newsprint in treasury size is like
oh, I used to have
the
the
best
big
day.
yeah, I used to have the Marvel and DC Treasury editions. They were nice.
They're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a great Thor one. I mean, I've got Conan Red Nails. I've got a little collection going. So it's
Okay.
they are, where are they?
I'm making a
Tell me.
bad
Oh,
joke. Is it
they're over there buying some books. They're there.
making a bad joke? Is it because we're getting older and eyes are going and we want something larger? You know?
It's that too. I mean, I still do read comics at regular size, and I'll even read digests sometimes. But there's something about being immersed in the experience, like diving into it.
Oh, I have
It's
a
really
couple of
cool.
the I have a couple of the artist edition books, and oh, they're amazing. Like looking at the
Which ones
artwork,
do you
and
have?
I have the Joe Kubert Enemy Ace, Love and Rockets, and one
Oh
by a
wow,
guy named Steve Yoel, who did a book called Zenith in the UK.
cool.
And yeah, and the artwork, I mean, one of them is like 18 by 24. It's large. Yeah. But it's amazing
And
looking at the
Chris,
artwork.
it is incredible. Chris, what about you? Do you have any artist editions?
I don't, and I'll tell you, there's two reasons I don't. One is I move around the world a lot, and so lugging them
Yeah.
around. But I'll tell you what I have a vast collection of is the Disney anime, because I was an animator. Like my background is in animation, so I have those giant Disney animation books where they're just basically like that
Oh,
size, and they
yes.
have like
Yes.
the original artwork printed original size, and they're just that sort of thing blows my mind as well. But the main
It
reason I
is
don't have
incredible.
them is just moving. I just move around too much and can't possibly drag everything with me all the time. So
Well, if you're ever in Toronto again, when you're back in Toronto, hit me up. We can meet at a pub somewhere, and I'll bring one of the artist editions, and we can open up and
awesome.
just
Oh,
pour
perfect.
through.
We need to do a meeting. We need to do a group meeting one day. Okay, so you talked about your influences and art and everything. Who are your no influences? Sorry, who are your major influences? We talked about your comics.
Right. So, uh, I imagine everything I've looked at has influenced, right? Um, Whether it's also film, TV, but the ones that I can only point to the influences that I know are there. Someone else might see something that's unknown to me, or I don't realize someone else is influenced. But I definitely like wish that my influences were, you know, Darwin Cook, Jack Kirby, Mignola. Those are probably my big three as artists whose work I look over, and Mazzucchelli, whose work I look over a lot to learn lessons from. And then there are guys like Tim Sale who I love and I actually avoid looking at sometimes because I worry I'm going to start aping. He doesn't use rulers in his finished art. He might rule things out in pencil, but his buildings are almost organic sometimes, and his figures can be, unique proportions, and faces can be almost grotesque at times. Like I really love his work, and he uses ink wash, and I use ink wash. So I worry that if I look at this stuff too much, I'm going to absorb too much. So I have to take him in small doses. But I love his work too. Yeah, those are probably Darwin Cook and Kirby and Mignola.
So I don't know. I've noticed this trend amongst people on the show, and we've talked about it in the past. But I like Kirby stuff now, but when I was a kid, I could not. I did not love it as
Same
much as
here. We
I
had
love it
this
now.
talk
It's like
before.
we had this talk before, and like I've noticed more and more people I've talked to about that have been like, like everybody loved Kirby. Like when I was a teenager and I was hanging around, I would hang around older artists. They'd be like, "Oh my god, this Kirby guy," and I'd look at it and be like, "It's okay, I guess." But like,
Yeah,
what's the deal? But now I look at it and I go, okay, I see what's going on.
I have a theory, and it could be full of holes, or maybe I'm onto something. Who knows? The way that I was first interacting with Kirby's artwork was through reprints out of context. For instance, there was a series called Marvel Saga
Yes.
around
Yeah.
Marvel's 25th anniversary, right? And it was a 25 issue maxi series retelling the years between, I guess, the beginning of the universe and maybe the arrival of Silver Surfer. And Kirby's panels were cut and pasted into that out of context, not with his page composition, and almost sort of like photographs of photographs of, or photocopies of photocopies of photocopies. So they were really, really bad. And they were paired next to other artists. And I was into, John Byrne in the 80s. And like I said
Yeah.
before, Arthur Adams. So it always looked terrible to me in the way it was presented. In the early 2000s, I got my hands on this book, um, Kirby by Mark Evanier, Kirby King of Comics. And when I was looking at it, although there was some 60s stuff reproduced, I saw penciled Kirby for the first time.
Oh,
And
it blows you
I
away. Yeah.
never knew like that he could draw that well. I didn't realize, I didn't realize what comics looked like in the 50s before he developed his style or as he was developing his 50s style, but I didn't realize what Marvel would have looked like if it had been DC or if it had been Atlas. And when I see what he did with that early Marvel stuff, come the mid 60s and where comics were before that, and I see his stuff in pencil, mind-blowingly good. He was
Take a look at
so good.
I'll send you a link. I have a book. It's a Kirby and Joe Simon book. It's a really thick book and a lot of pencil work in that. Lot of
Yeah,
pencil work.
it's I just started seeing stuff in black and white and printed at high quality, and then I started also, I got into, like everybody else, Batman the animated series and looking at Bruce Timm's character designs, especially as he got into having more characters, like when he gets into Superman, and then I start seeing the Kirby characters there, and the way that Bruce Timm simplifies anatomy from motion, and I was like, oh, I can now see how much he's pulling from Kirby and from that version of comics, and it just I fell in love with it, and it all made sense to me after more experience. The version of
But
Kirby that I saw as a young guy, it didn't look good. It
that's
wasn't being presented
yes.
well, but now that I'm seeing it presented well, I think it is. It, it might be the purest version of the superhero thing. Like his Silver Age work, I'm speechless about it. Every time I come across one of those beat up old Kirby comics, no matter what, I add it to my bin of Kirby books, and I have a nice little long bin going of all the Kirby stuff. So I adore him. I think he's genius
Yeah,
and fast as can be. Oh my goodness. So
it's
yeah, I've
ridiculously
become a bit of
fast.
a student of his.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
when you could when you could do what 3 books a month or 4 months books a month and still hold your style,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, and like we got the redesigns for crazy Thor stuff, but just his craft that he had was so good. And yeah, I'm a little bit speechless. I don't know what to say. He was really good.
One thing I like, I appreciate about Kirby more as you get older too is his ability to pose a character differently, like, and it works. Like his posing is just I sit there and I have to go through Google and be like, because my I have a lot of sort of like kung fu type poses, and so I'm like going through Google and looking at kung fu, and then you flip through a Kirby book and you think like every character's got this unique, interesting pose every single page, and he's doing each one of these pages like so quickly, and you're just like, how in the world do you have that many poses in your brain and being able to do it?
Oh,
Like it's
it's amazing.
unbelievable.
It's amazing. I
Yeah.
remember one time I was complaining to a friend of mine about, he was complaining to me actually about his drawing situation, like, set up table and all that stuff. Then I showed him a photo of Kirby someone posted, Kirby's drafting table and his chair. And you look and you go, wow, this guy produced all this artwork on this type of table, this type of
Yeah,
chair, and he used standard 2B pencils.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, he was something. I think the other thing about his work I really, really am drawn toward is his work comes out, where a lot of other comics, sort of before him and of his time, it's like everything is side scroll characters.
yeah,
Everyone's going this
Oh
way,
yeah,
they're going across the
yes.
page, and his are coming. He's finally
And
using depth in such a more dynamic way than everybody else. Um, yeah, just I can't. I have to actually pull back on when I'm drawing a cover. I was working on a cover. I think it's right here. Unfortunately, it was anyway. It's there. It's going to be this guy, and I had him standing in such a Kirby stance before. He was like out. This hand was out coming even way closer to the camera. His legs were like super wide, and he was like just doing one of these. And I drew it. I had to say, okay, whoa, 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 whoa. It's too much. It's too Kirby. It wasn't
Yeah.
enough of me. So I love his dynamics, and I find it's very appealing and so much fun.
I
Like you
think,
said before, but I make a kid wanting to draw it. Like
yeah,
when I see stuff, I want to draw his stuff.
I think the one thing about that Kirby lucked into, and I know there's a lot of people who are like sort of anti Stan Lee, or you're either in Camp Stan Lee or Camp Kirby. The one thing that Stan Lee gave Kirby, or at least the writing team in that time, was they gave him characters that he could pose like this, and that he could make bigger and better. And like, so a lot of the people who wrote, or at least gave him these characters, whether it was his creation or not, we don't know. We weren't in that office, but there's a certain sort of cosmicness to his characters, and it's sort of like wild, audacious characters that he drew. He could do in that pose. Like if you were doing a quiet little spy book, you wouldn't want your character to be posed like that. If you're doing a dude with a giant hammer, or a guy who is eating a planet, you can draw him like that. And so the advantage was that one of the great advantages is not only was Kirby a great artist, and I'm sure he could have drawn the other stuff, but the thing that really made Kirby Kirby 2 was the craziness of these characters. Like they weren't realistic characters by any stretch of the imagination. There were these,
No, but then again, to defend Kirby, look at his the book I have of his Simon and Joe Simon and Kirby book. Look at his
sure,
Western and romance stuff. I mean, he's
Boom.
amazing. He's
yeah,
He
amazing.
invented the genre of romance
Yeah,
comic.
that's it. It's amazing work. Kirby's one of those guys. I hate to say it, what can he not do? That's the
yeah.
question. He's done everything. Come on,
Agreed.
Even the Western stuff. The Western stuff he
Yeah.
does amazing.
And you're right. We don't have to be another episode that rehashes the Lee v. Kirby. I'd rather be part of the Lee and Kirby conversation,
Yeah.
because the result we get is wonderful. But I will put one thought into that if you don't mind. Um, I wonder how much Lee was inspired by what he saw on the page when Kirby delivered them. Remembering that, of course, Marvel Method, Stanley is scripting after he gets pages from
Well,
Kirby.
that's it. Yes.
So when you see those pages, I bet you can disagree if you want to, but I bet it elevates Lee's writing to write for those pages.
Oh, I
Yeah.
agree. I 100% agree on that. And
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we could go into a huge people could debate on this over and over again, but you look at Kirby, you look at his artwork, you could tell that guy's a genius. I mean, come on, it was someone posted a thing saying Kirby created Galactus in his late 40s. Look at the
Yeah, he creates
imagination.
Fantastic Four. The
Yeah,
Fantastic Four is when he's 40. So that,
yeah. Look at his
what is
imagination. Yeah,
Galactus trilogy is 66, 67, I think, around there.
yeah.
Pretty cool. Pretty no, he is amazing. And we can probably also agree, I'm assuming, that there's no better like frontman of the band than Stan Lee.
Yeah.
He might not have written all the songs. He might not have lifted the gear to put it on stage, but put him in front of an audience and he does a better job fronting the operation, and did a great job promoting comics in North America, during his tenure. The fact that he's management and related to ownership and prevents Kirby from getting a stake is probably the biggest problem that I have.
Oh, I
It's not
agree.
about
I
who
agree.
gets credit. It's about who has the role of power, who determines who gets to what pages and whose name goes on the book. And who do I talk to the publisher about? Do I tell him that Jack did this, or I tell the publisher that I did it?
Yeah.
Do I tell the media that I did it, or tell the media that Jack did it? And so in that power
Yeah.
position, there is definitely some Machiavellian maneuvering to prevent Kirby from having the public eye and having the financial compensation that goes with the amount of work that's being done.
Well,
So
that's what I want to
the
see.
only
Yeah.
issue, yeah, I'm not worried about the Lennon and McCartney who wrote what of it all, and who's better, because we all can form our own opinions about that by looking at the work, but it's the dynamics of the role that Lee has and how he's able to keep Kirby on a page by page paycheck and never puts him on
Yeah.
salary working for the company with job security and benefits and everything for a decade. He never gives him that. So
Yeah.
that's where I get like I side definitely one way if we're gonna make it a
Oh,
dichotomy.
yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although,
But I
to be
wonder,
honest, the way I think about it is instead of thinking about that, I always go to page 2 of every comic book and realize because that's after the credits have been listed. That's after, Stan Lee presents is gone. As soon as you get to page 2, it's whether it's the
it's
two of them, it's the story and the beautiful art coming together, and you're lost in that, and you can forget about it. So it's always and that's when you're a kid, you don't care. I didn't really even care who Stan Lee was. I just cared after the page what was Spider-Man or what was the Fantastic Four going to do. That's all I cared about.
mentioning that. I wonder what the movie, if how much credit they're going to give Kirby on that one.
Oh, they'll give him lots of credit. There's enough. I think there's enough publicity nowadays that about who Jack Kirby was that they're
And
going to give him some.
Kevin Feige said a lot of the influences were from Kirby. He didn't mention Stan Lee at all.
Yeah.
They still, they have that Stanley documentary. I use the documentary in italics or maybe with quotation marks. They have that, that documentary on Disney Plus, and it is part of the brand. Like they have to mythologize him
I still
to
haven't watched
kind of
that
keep
because
this.
yeah.
Oh, it's worth watching for a few reasons. It's entertaining. It's also kind of interesting to see like that version. I'm just going to call it propaganda, and I know it's a loaded word, but to see like how they are presenting the myth of Stan Lee, and you can insert your own bits of like probably could have mentioned Kirby there, probably should have
Yeah.
mentioned Ditko more there. It all that is interesting, and luckily, maybe Kirby's one of those guys that's just for us, just for
Yes.
the insider a little bit, or the fan who wants to go one step further. It's the same as you're watching a movie and you're like, oh, I like this movie because actor X is in it. And then like the insider guy was like, actually, the screenwriter and the director or the director of photography, like
Yes.
that's what made that scene go from an A to an A plus. Like maybe learn their names too. So it's fun to realize like all your soundtracks that you love are by the same composer. Like this, when you want to know more, you can go find out that Kirby created all this huge body of work. If you don't want to
Mention,
know,
mentioning that I finished watching a couple of months back. Finished finally watched it. Bill and Me about Bill Finger and how he finally got credit on Batman.
yeah, after he's dead.
Yeah, which is yes. It's a sad story. It's a sad story,
Yes.
but and it's same thing. You know, it. I mean, every business, music, comics, movies, people got screwed. You know.
Yeah, it's interesting in that one how quickly Bob Kane got a lawyer involved in
Yes, that's
securing
it.
that deal with DC, that his name is always in the byline, and that
Yeah,
it was like an unchallengeable thing, even though the work had already been a collaboration at that point. He made sure he got ahead of that naive Bill Finger who didn't ever expect
and
his
I
friend to screw him
and I
over.
remember as a young teenager, like going back into the early '80s, reading that Bill Finger was screwed on getting credit for this character, and this is
Mm.
going back 30 some years ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I don't remember when I first heard his name.
nothing happened since but until what 4 years ago, I think it was.
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe I'm not sure how long
Hmm.
his family or whoever was pursuing the idea of him getting credit, but now his name's on there, so
Oh yeah,
it's
it's in
good.
the
But the guy died penniless. Like it's
That's it.
terrible.
That's the sad part. That's the sad
Yeah.
part.
So
So,
what else can I answer?
getting back to you, tools of the trade. What when you're using when you're doing your pencils and inking, what do you use?
Stadler pencil. I like those. Um, I like gum erasers. I love a good, what are these? Tombow brush pen.
That's what I was going to ask if you use marker
Love.
brush pens or traditional, brush and ink.
Oh, I'm not very good with cleaning up. So I mean, right there, there is a bottle of ink and a palette. So like I do once in a while fill in bigger areas. But again, that time with like those 10,000 hours plus of learning to work with a pencil, it translates right into this for me. So I can get my thin to thicks. I really love um, how there's no cleanup. The drawing time is fast. It's archival ink, so it when I add water to, let's say, do ink wash, like this stuff doesn't smudge. It stays. I
Okay.
love them. They're really good. I use lots of things like a jelly roll for little bits of white whenever I need to. Um, Microns for things like panel borders and maybe features on the face, any kind of straight line to detail. I use a good micron. Those are my basic tools, but a lot of times I'm making images like that one, where I'm like really crazy high contrast black. So filling in all those spaces, it's good to have a bottle of ink nearby and a brush that I don't mind destroying to fill in all those spaces. But that's pretty much what I use. And I'm working on Bristol. I almost always tape my work down now. That way I can walk around. I can take it with me places and
Yes.
keep working. I've learned to work at conventions or shows at my table. When my family is downstairs, I like to be around them when I can. Not stuck up here in the studio. So if I want to be downstairs with everyone, I can kind of bring it with me and hold it up right on my lap so I can get that angle the way I like. But also my paper never gets wrinkled up anymore if I tape it down. So I have always like I have right now three things on three different boards around and I use them when I need to. So yeah, it's fun. But those are
Now,
most of the tools that I use.
paper wise, do you do traditional 11 by 17 size?
Yeah, oh yeah. It's right here. Well, stuff is gonna fall off. Hold on. Strathmore, Bristol.
Yes, that's it.
This way, this
Okay.
way. Like it's a, I guess, 100 series or is it
Yeah,
200
no,
series?
that's a good
300,
paper.
300
Yeah.
series.
I know I have a pad of that. That's a great paper.
I
It
use that.
holds ink very well.
It does, and it's really smooth to work on. This is the Vellum Bristol. I like it a lot. Um, I probably exclusively work on that these days, and I also will do some work at 9 by 12, the same paper. I find that selling commissions, the 9 by 12 seems to go well. Not all everyone wants to buy 11 by 17, so having some smaller pieces around is nice, and it really is faster to do a smaller page. So I can get some other images done quick if I work a little smaller.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would agree with
Any,
you
and then
about the ink. I have a bottle of ink, and I find that I just end up replacing it every 10 years because I've always want to have a bottle of ink, and I might use it like every once in a while, but I've never finished a bottle of ink before it's sort of gotten a little wonky, and I've had to buy a new one, or it's dried, or the lid is dried on so much that I can't possibly take it off. So it's funny because I have every intention of using ink more often from an ink bottle, but then every time I end up pulling out my microns and my brush pens and just forget about it.
they're just the microns are great and brush pens are great. They're fast and there's no cleanup,
Yeah.
and that is a very appealing part of the process. I do not like washing brushes.
now
Yeah.
they
I haven't been able to get into the ink nibs. Every time I use one, I actually find that there's no flow, and I just end up scratching the crap out of my paper.
and it
I
splatters.
what it,
Yeah.
yeah. I truthfully, I just need to get trained better, and I need to practice more. And I'd rather just draw comics. So
Yeah.
I don't take a step back and learn to use that traditional tool. I just move forward with the pens I already have around. When
See,
it comes to the
nowadays,
digital side, I use digital stuff. I use Photoshop. So that's also a thing I needed to get schooled on in those early days of learning everything about Photoshop. And thank goodness that the internet is around now. It wasn't around, of course, when I was 20. So having every tutorial imaginable available has really helped me get pages ready using Photoshop, coloring through Photoshop, and then preparing books and doing book design in InDesign. And the marriage of those two has been seamless. So
Oh,
I
perfect.
dig it.
Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big Photoshop user as well. That's pretty much all of my pages will go through Photoshop as sort of until the last part where I'm sort of putting the pages together. But Photoshop I use Photoshop, but I also use Procreate to do my coloring. But Photoshop's
Do you
really,
procreate on a tablet?
yep. Yeah. So my coloring, I'll Procreate on a tablet. So I do my artwork. It's funny you were talking about like enjoying the textures of paper and like when you see original artwork, like or reprinted in a book, you want to see the everything. One of the things I do for my book, because I want it to look like a drawing, I don't want it to look like something else, is I actually photograph my pages instead of scanning them, so that way you can see the
Beautiful.
texture of the paper and you can sort of see that it's a drawing. Like I want, again, it goes back to that idea. I want kids to be able to redraw it, and I want them to know that this is something that was put on a piece of paper and not something that was, that's, when you look at like particularly the mid 90s stuff that was so sort of processed, you're like, I don't even know where this came from. Like this is like
Right.
so deep into like computer blending world. Like, so I actually leave like every once in a while there'll be a little blob of like a little weird paper mark that was there, and I'll leave it. And I'm just like, well, because I want this to look like it's on a piece of paper. And so and then I basically photograph it, and then I bring my photographs into after sort of photoshopping them to make sure they're square perfectly. I bring them into Procreate, and I do all my coloring in Procreate. The main reason I do it in Procreate, I mean, I could do it in Photoshop, but Procreate, again, as you said, like with your family, you can be sitting downstairs at the dining room table with my tablet coloring away, and I don't have to worry. It's portable. I can take it on the bus. I travel a lot. I'm on a lot of airplanes, so I'll color a lot of books while I'm flying on an airplane. So I'll just be sitting there coloring my books on a plane while I'm traveling and stuff like that. So it's more out of simplicity. There's lots of other ways to do it, but Procreate's fine that way. And you can zoom in. So if you want to get into like a little colored detail, you can sort of zoom in a little bit and not have to worry about it too much. So that's the main reason I do it. And I can keep my line, like I can keep my scanned work still looking beautifully photographed in Procreate and then still work with it. So
I only played around with Procreate for maybe a couple weeks, and I found that
Same
my
here.
color measures were not exactly the same between Photoshop and Procreate. Like
mm-hmm.
my cyan changed,
Yeah.
and it made me angry.
I mean, we can get weird technical, but that's basically because the type of screen that your tablet is different than the type of screen your
No,
monitor is.
I just watched a video. Tom and I were Tom Yo, another person, creator on our books. We were talking about that. I just watched a video from a DC colorist about doing digital coloring for online digital comics compared to printed comics.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been running into this issue for the last 20 years or so. You could never get the exact colors, It's it's hard. It's hard. And his best advice is think in CMYK. Don't
Yeah.
think in RGB, think in CMYK, and that's it. He goes, the mutated colors sometimes you get thinking that way, because if you start thinking in digital colors, you have thousands and millions of colors that will not reproduce the way you want. And
I
like you
keep,
said, from one screen to another screen.
yeah. What I do is I keep a limited palette. So I have a specific palette for my comic book.
That's it. Yes.
And so I have like about 40 colors that I use, and that's it. And so far, every once in a while I have to come up with a new one, but it's always like I keep it very limited, and I know how they're going to print with the printer that I use. And so I instantly know that. So I just know how it's going to transfer and it's going to work. So it's for me digitally, like I don't care what my tablet looks like. I know that that's the color that I use for my main character's skin, and that's how it's going to look. It's going to print out the way I want it to. Even if on Procreate or on my monitor, it looks a little wonky. I
I
know that
did
that's going to
see
work print wise.
I was watching a video from this manga artist, and what she did was she created her own color swatches for,
Yeah,
and that's all the colors she uses for her comics.
yeah. Procreate actually allows you to create a bank of colors, and so that's what I use. It's so I basically create a palette, and then when I'm coloring a Blue Orchid page, I just load up that palette, and then
But
I can just
again,
take from that palette.
what Jason ran into is just where from one screen to another screen, the color changes. That's
Yeah,
where and then when you print it, it might come out something different.
But
I
yeah,
gotta say, it wasn't the screen that was the issue. It was the actual distribution of like the digital value of each of the colors was shifting between the two applications.
really.
So, right, right. So where like, let's say a color was 50% yellow, 50% magenta, and 100% cyan. When I opened that same thing in Photoshop, it would be like 98% cyan,
Wow.
Oh
41%
wow.
yellow. And I was like, I can't, I have going and fixing the percentages every time. So there was something technical going on between the way those two applications were talking to each other, I guess. And I needed to just work that out. But I got frustrated and just went back to Photoshop.
Fair enough.
Anyway,
Yeah.
not our problem to solve today.
But then again, you could go back to the old school way of I know Adobe has a good selection of them. Pantone's color swatches, where
Yes.
at least you know that color is going to be that color all the time.
Yeah. There are lots of things I would love to still keep trying. Like I want to do color on paper as well,
Yeah.
but I haven't got there
Yes.
yet. We'll see. I'm not bold enough yet, but maybe tomorrow.
There you go.
Okay, I hate to say this. It's telling me I have 5 minutes left
Okay.
for
That's
video.
I see it. What can we do to what else
Should
would
we
you
do
like to talk about?
should we do a quick wrap up? How much minutes it says? 5 minutes and 13 seconds. Should
Let's
we
do a
do a
wrap up.
quick wrap up?
Yeah. Okay, you start.
Okay, Jason, we talked about a lot of things. We need to have you back on here again
Anytime.
because we could talk about comics. We could do a full episode on GI Joe alone.
Whoa. I thought that's what this was.
No, we still have to talk about Larry Hama and all the Mike Zeck covers and the the all silent issue. So we have lots to talk about.
I'm in for all of it. By the way, the inker from G.I. Joe #1 was Bob McLeod. Just putting it out there.
Nice.
Okay, Bob McLeod. How Trimpy and Bob McLeod. I remember Trimpy's art. I couldn't remember the inker.
And I think they
Very,
took more time on that than a regular issue because the rendering is more subtle than it was in other issues.
yeah. Yeah. I think so. It's definitely it's the perfect first issue. So it's
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Okay, definitely need to do another episode with Jason sometime.
Happy to do
definitely,
it.
definitely, and we need everybody out there to pick up his comic book because I think we need more Canadian superheroes that
And
are
we'll put the links at the
historical
bottom.
based. Yes,
Sure.
yes,
Thank you. Please do.
yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.